Welcome to the Woman Liberated Podcast. I'm your host and guide, Nina Vasquez. Each week, you can expect a real and raw conversation along with tools to help you in your healing journey. My intention for this podcast is to help you break free from your limiting beliefs, heal your complex trauma, and create the life you want. I'm a triple certified life coach, and I work with women who want more for their life, but they know they have to heal the wounds of their past to create the future they really desire. All right, let's go on this journey together. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I want to talk to you about the number one life coaching tool, and we might as well call it the number one self-coaching tool that you can use in your life to help you, number one, stop suffering, and number two, be more mindful. Because the thing is, your thoughts create your reality. We've all heard that several times, right? And you kind of want to slap people in the face when they tell you that. So in this podcast, I want to teach you what that truly means. And I want to teach you how to become a self-coaching expert. That was one of the very first thing that I ever learned in life coaching is how to self-coach myself. And I want to teach that to you. But first, let's talk about what life coaching is. I have met a lot of people on this life coaching journey, and a lot of people think that life coaches are here to tell you what to do with your life. That could not be further from the truth. But when I first walked into the world of life coaching, I hired a team of life coaches who coached me. And I remember my very first session. So I go on Zoom, my very first session, and I'm like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell this life coach all the things that are wrong with my life, all the things I've walked through, and I'm going to ask them to tell me what to do. I literally thought that. I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to ask her. And I remember asking her, like, tell me what to do. And, her question to me is, why do you think I know what you should do more than you know what you should do? And that broke my brain. So life coaching, as life coaches, our job is not to tell you what to do. We believe that you have the innate wisdom inside of you. Our job is to help you see your mind, because if you understand the human experience, everything happens in the mind, right? And if you could see me on YouTube, I'm like pointing at my mind. Everything in the human experience it happens at the mind and the body level. I heard on Instagram, like a reel or something, and I can't remember the girl's name, but I'm giving her credit for this. She said, imagine that you had that everything in your life, in your mind was on a phone app, like your iPhone app. And if you wanted to change anything, you could just go to the iPhone app and do an upgrade. Right. Upgrade the app or reset the app, and you could change your beliefs with the app. Well, here's the good news. Your brain is the app. And that's how she explained it, which I thought was so fascinating, because we can actually look at the app, our brain, and begin to change our life. But we have to get good at seeing what the app already says, right? What the brain already says, what the brain already believes. And you might find a lot of people out there in the world that really encourage meditation. And I do too. I love meditation. But let's say you sit down for 15 minutes a day and you quiet the mind and you bring your attention to your breath for 15 minutes. You're quieting the mind and bringing yourself to breath, right? And you're creating mindfulness. But what do you do for the other 23 hours, 45 minutes of the day? In order to be more mindful throughout your day, I'm going to teach you the number one life coaching tool that if you just do this in your life, you'll bring more mindfulness and stop suffering as much. So let's talk about it. So the tool is facts versus story, right? Separating facts versus the story. For example, maybe you're going throughout your day, you're in a relationship with someone, whether it's a husband, partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, whatever that is. Let's say you have a conversation with them and you leave the conversation and you're feeling kind of, I don't know, frustrated or annoyed or sad or disappointed, or any other emotion. It's just not, you're not feeling settled about it. You're not feeling good about it. You're feeling bad. What I want you to do is ask yourself, what is the story I'm telling myself right now? Separate the facts from the story. In this instance, for example, say the facts is this person said words. You might tell yourself what are the words they said to make it more factual. Everybody needs to agree on the facts, right? The facts is over here on my left side, right? And maybe the story you're telling yourself is he doesn't respect me, or she doesn't respect me, or they're not listening, or they didn't listen to me. Whatever that story is, you want to find the story that you're telling yourself about the situation, right? Separating the facts from the story. Even just doing that step will help you to see and be more mindful about what's going on in the mind, what's going on in your app, right? And then you want to ask yourself, how do I show up when I believe this story? What do I do? Most of the time, you'll notice that if you're believing somebody isn't respecting you, then you'll shut down and begin not respecting them, right? Or maybe you self-abandon and not respect yourself. Depends on what happens for you. But ask yourself, like, what do I do when I believe this? How do I show up, right? You'll begin to notice the pattern. And throughout your day, you'll notice, oh, actually, all that's factual is they said these words. And then my brain, my automatic brain made up this story, right? Remember, if you haven't listened to the other episodes of this podcast, 95% of what we think, feel, and do is unconscious until we shine a flashlight on it and be like, oh, I could see I made up this story. Here's the story I'm telling myself. We're not doing this to negate your belief or to negate the way you feel. We're not doing this at all for that. We're just bringing awareness to what your thinking is, right? Maybe you want to believe that that person disrespected you. Maybe you want to believe that. That's fine. But we're just putting a flashlight on it, right? Or maybe you want to believe they didn't listen to me in that situation, right? So after you do that, I really like to use Byron Katie's The Work process. It's a 4-step process, 4 questions. The first question is it true? Yes or no? If it's no, move to step 3, question 3, which is, how do you react when that happens? How do you react? Which is what I just said. Like, how do you show up when you believe that? If it's yes, ask yourself, can I absolutely know that it's true? That's question 2 of Byron Katie's The Work. Can I absolutely know he doesn't respect me? She doesn't respect me. Can I absolutely know that they weren't listening to me? And yes or no. And then the 4th question in Byron Katie's work is, who or what would I be without the thought? Who or what would I be without the thought? And it's interesting because I love asking myself too, for example, if a friend was telling me this story about an interaction they had with their partner or spouse, what would I think? Would I think they weren't respecting? Or would I think they weren't listening? Or would I think something else? Right? So I like to ask myself that question as well. That's not one of Byron Katie's The Work questions, but I like to ask myself to get perspective. And another thing I like to ask is, if I can't absolutely know they don't respect me, what else could be true in that? Like, what else could have been happening for them? Right? What could have been happening in their mind? Now, we're not using this example for like a physical altercation or abuse. No. We're using it for, like, you just had a conversation with someone and you just felt like really not good afterwards. What is the story you're telling yourself? So that's in the relationship example, but let's talk about health and weight, for example. So imagine you are on a weight loss journey and you are, let's say you're 10 pounds down and you have 20 pounds left. And one day you get on the scale and it's up 4 pounds, right? That would be factual. One day I weighed 160 pounds and the next day I weighed 164 pounds. That's the facts. The scale says 164 pounds, right? That's all that's factual. Then the mind, which I like to call this mind drama about the scale. This is why a lot of people don't like to get on the scale, because they don't have control of their mind, and their mind gives the scale meaning, right? So you want to ask yourself, what is the story I'm telling myself about the scale? Is the story that this is no big deal, this is part of the weight loss journey? Or is the story that I'm never going to be able to lose this weight, I'm always going to be this quote unquote fat, because we often criticize ourselves and use those words. I'm using air quotes around the fat word. Is the story that I suck and I shouldn't have eaten that way, and I'm never going to get there? Like, what is your story that you tell yourself when you get on the scale? Remember, it's unconscious, it's automatic, right? What is the story? It will help you, because then you can ask yourself, when I believe that I'm never going to get to my weight loss goal, when I believe that that means I'm never going to get there, how do I show up for my goal? What do I do? Right? A lot of times we'll throw in the towel, we'll like micro quit, right? So the reason why you want to separate facts from story is because if you don't separate facts from story, you'll go throughout your day and you'll get to the next day and you'll be like, wow, why did I overeat today? Well, because you were believing that you were never going to get there. So why not do it? Or why do it at all? Right? If this podcast is resonating with you, and next year on January 1st, 2025, you just cannot even imagine waking up with the same struggles that you're experiencing today, I want to invite you to join the Woman Liberated group coaching program that kicks off April 15th. Whether it's you're wanting to finally lose the weight and overcome emotional eating, or overcome the struggles you've had with your weight your whole life, or you want to stop people pleasing, or you want to be able to use your voice and feel safe to express your true feelings, or maybe it's you want to show up differently in your relationships with your kids or your partner or your spouse or the people at work. Or maybe it's you want a whole career change altogether and you need to gain the confidence and courage to step out into your true self. Whatever that desire is on your heart, I want to invite you to join us in the Woman Liberated group coaching program. You can find more information at the link in the show notes. And if you still aren't sure, scroll down to the bottom of the page on that link and schedule a call with me. I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you in the program. So that's another area that you can use facts versus story. Another area that I really struggled with at the very beginning of my journey was this self-critical voice I had, whether it was procrastinating or my desk being a quote unquote mess, or I'm a hot mess. Like I used to think like, I'm just a hot mess today, or I can't get my shit together. Whatever those thoughts are, the story is about yourself. You want to start separating fact from story, right? Maybe your desk, like my desk has some things on it right now. And I used to tell myself that like, I'm such a hot mess. How can we make it more factual? Separating facts from story might sound like I have some element packs on top of some books. I have a notebook to the left of me. I have some papers stacked up, maybe an inch thick of paper stacked up. That would be factual. I can't add, I need to organize them because that's my story about them. Then you want to ask yourself, what am I making this mean? This happens a lot with us women about our kitchen. Yep, I'm going there. I am going there. So imagine that you have a sink of dishes, right? You're going about your day and you have a story about the sink of dishes. How do we make it more factual is we could say, I have 5 cups, 5 plates, a pot, a spatula, 3 forks. That would be the facts. What is the story you're telling yourself? I'm such a procrastinator. I suck. I should be cleaner. I'm not a good mom. I'm not a good wife. I'm not a good husband. Whatever the story is, what is the story that you're telling yourself about yourself, right? Separating fact from story will help you just become more mindful about what your program, the app on your phone, AKA your brain, is doing behind the scenes. And then when you believe that story about yourself, how do you feel? And then when you feel that way because you're believing the story about yourself, how do you show up? What are you doing? Is it helping you move towards where you want to go, or is it taking you away from where you want to go? If it's helping you, if the story is helping you, keep it. But if it's having you suffer, which I used to think, I really would internally be suffering because I thought that I was a horrible person if my house wasn't just spotless, or I wasn't a good wife, or I wasn't a good mom, or I wasn't a good person, or I was just a horrible human being. I'm laughing at it now because it's hard for me to access, but I want you to think about like, what is a story you tell yourself about maybe your car not being vacuumed, right? This is where internal suffering comes from. Maybe it's not your car for you. Maybe it's your home, or maybe you don't make your bed every day. What do you make that mean about you? What is the story you tell yourself? We could probably look online and see where that comes from. Because like all these people that wake up at 5 and make their bed every day, they have beliefs about what that means about them, but we don't have to believe it. You have to check in with yourself and see, like, is this a suffering story? And when I believe it, how do I show up? Does it move me toward what I want, or does it move me away from what I want? With the weight loss example, I know for sure that self-criticism never creates weight loss. And I probably am, I'm saying that the word never is harsh there, right? It's pretty hard. I can probably rewind that. Let me retract that. It might for a time period. But at some point in my own experience with coaching several hundreds of people on weight loss and my own self on weight loss, it stops working at some point. I was in the military, so they taught us to be self-critical and taught us to put ourselves down, to create movement, to create fire behind our ass, to get ourselves to go. And it worked for a time until it didn't work anymore. And it was going backwards, and it created a lot of shame because now I wasn't the person that they said I should be, right? So then now I'm shameful because I actually do procrastinate sometimes, right? And that I've talked about procrastination a couple of times because that's been one of my like things that I've been working on in my life, and that comes with trauma, and it comes with, if your nervous system's automatic trauma response is shut down, we often become a person who sometimes procrastinates and sometimes doesn't. I don't like to identify myself as a procrastinator because I don't always procrastinate, but that is a way to separate facts from story too. So maybe this week, it's Tuesday where I'm at. Maybe this week I procrastinated on 2 things, but not the other 5 things. But what the brain will do is it'll give it a story. I'm a procrastinator. And when I'm a procrastinator, I feel shame. When I believe that story, I feel shame. And when I feel shame, I overeat. And I try to hide it from other people that sometimes I procrastinate, or quote unquote, the story, I'm a procrastinator. And then I get on social media and I scroll for an hour or 2 at night because I feel so shameful about it. So I continue to do it. So that proves that the story that I'm telling myself, I'm a procrastinator, which is an identity statement, is taking me away from what I really want to do. Because truly, I don't want to be on social media, quote unquote, procrastinating for 2 hours. So the story isn't serving me, right? So factually, I could tell myself, I plan to do something at 12 p.m. on Monday, and I didn't do it. That's factual. The story is I'm a procrastinator, right? So just separating that story from fact, if you can just sit on, actually, the only thing that's true here is XYZ, you'll remove the emotional charge for it. And then you can ask yourself, what do I want to make this mean? maybe I don't want to make it mean anything about the trajectory of me not procrastinating, or I don't want to make it mean anything about my identity. Maybe I want to make it mean that everybody in the world sometimes procrastinates, says they're going to do something and doesn't do it at that moment, right? Maybe that will help me suffer less. And maybe I'll normalize it for myself. And then I'll just eventually just not do it as much because I don't need to cope with the emotion that I'm creating with my story. Remember, your stories in your mind, your brain, they create the emotion, right? So we've talked about self, your health, your relationships. This could be the same thing for finances. Maybe you have a story about yourself that you'll never make six figures. Maybe you have a story about yourself that you're always going to be broke. Maybe you have a story about your lineage that I come from here, so I'm not going to make over, I don't know, 50K. What is that for you? Or maybe it's opposite. Maybe it's, I am going to make $500,000 this year. What is the story you tell yourself about your finances? You want to separate facts from story. Facts would be the numbers in your bank account, right? And then ask yourself, what is the story I'm telling myself right now about money? You might even start with money is and fill in the blank. And you can find the story that you're telling yourself about money. And then ask yourself Byron Katie's The Work questions like, is it true? Can I absolutely know it's true? How do I show up? How do I react when I believe that? And then who or what would I be without that thought? How would I show up in my life if I really didn't believe this story? Right? So fact versus story is one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself throughout the day. Even in your career, maybe you're in a meeting and you're in a Zoom meeting and you say something and somebody says something back. And then all of a sudden you feel this sinking feeling in your stomach and you leave the meeting and you're feeling maybe frustrated or maybe annoyed, or you feel stuck, or you feel embarrassed. Like, ask yourself, what is the story I'm telling myself? Maybe the story is they don't value me. And then ask yourself, when I believe they don't value me, how do I show up? Oh, in that moment, I believe they didn't value me. So I dimmed my light and I got quiet. And then the result was I didn't value me. And I made it impossible for them to value me because I got quiet. Right? So asking yourself, what is my story, is honestly the number one self-coaching tool that you can do to bring more awareness to your life. Now, I want you to know that, let's say you do this and you're like, you know what? That thought, it serves me. When I believe that, I show up this way and I like it when I show up this way. Keep the thought. That's the fun part. Remember, you have an app on your phone. It's called your brain. You get to choose what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of. So keep it, but this will help you become more mindful about your life in general and mindful about the suffering. There's some instances where, for example, we think we're a hot mess and it's not serving us. It's causing us extra suffering. You could find a lot of evidence to prove that you're a hot mess, whether it's you're late all the time, you're 5 minutes late, you're 2 minutes late, or you have, I'm looking at my kitchen right now, which doesn't happen to be super clean. This morning I woke up 20 minutes before a session. Like, that could be a lot of evidence that to prove I'm a hot mess. But when I believe I'm a hot mess, I feel embarrassed. And when I feel embarrassed about being quote unquote a hot mess, I judge myself. I compare myself to other people. I create more internal suffering. and which causes me to not be able to focus on the things I want to focus on in the present moment. And then I create more of a quote unquote hot mess, because what we think about, we create, right? If we believe we're a hot mess, we show up in the way that we think that we're a hot mess. We show up in a hot messness, right? So ask yourself, what is it that I believe about myself all the time? And do I want to continue believing it? Because truly, you have the power to change your mind. This is neuroplasticity. You have the power to say, no, I don't believe that about myself anymore. I don't believe I'm a procrastinator. I believe that sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I believe that abundance and wealth is coming to me, not that I'm always going to be broke. I'm choosing to believe that, right? You get to choose to believe whatever you want to in this lifetime. And this is what's so fun. The last thing that I'll leave you with today in today's podcast is, which I always keep coming back to, is before you do the facts versus story separation, I want you to regulate your nervous system in some way. If you're anxious, shake yourself out, shake your arms, shake your legs, shake. If you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, take a couple deep belly breaths. Regulate your nervous system first, because the reason why you want to regulate first is because if you're dysregulated enough to a point where, well, if you're dysregulated, let's just make that a blanket statement. If you're dysregulated in your nervous system, your survival brain is activated. Your survival brain only cares about three things: keep you safe, conserve energy, and seek pleasure in the moment, right? If you regulate to a point where you're feeling a little safe in your body, regulated with breath or movement, what's going to happen is your learning brain or your higher brain comes on board. And that's when you can really look at it like, what happened? What are the facts here? And what am I telling myself? What is the story I'm telling? If you try to do this process, facts versus story, when you're dysregulated, it's going to be a challenging process. You're only going to be accessing survival thoughts, which are usually going to really prove the unconscious belief true. Okay. So regulation. And I have a free tool for nervous system regulation in the comment section of this podcast. So I'm sorry, in the note section of this podcast. I hope this was helpful. This is one of the tools that I have to use, or honestly don't have to, I choose to every single day. What is the story I'm telling myself about this? What is the story you're telling yourself about the biggest pain point you have in your life right now? What is the story? I'll leave you with that, and I'll see you next week. Bye.